The county fair was supposed to be the safest place in Willow Creek. Lanterns glowed like warm stars above the dusty grounds. Country music drifted from the wooden stage, and the scent of fried dough and roasted corn wrapped around families like a familiar blanket. Children ran between booths with painted faces and sticky fingers. Couples laughed under strings of yellow lights. It was the kind of night where nothing bad was supposed to happen. But humiliation does not ask for permission. It arrives uninvited, loud and merciless. Emma Carter had come to the fair alone. She stood near the edge of the crowd, wearing a simple blue dress she had ironed 3 times before leaving her small apartment. She had hesitated at the door earlier, staring at her reflection. 24 years old. A waitress at Miller's Diner. Barely enough money to pay rent. The kind of girl people overlooked until they needed coffee refilled. Tonight, she told herself, she would not hide. She had grown up in Willow Creek, but she had learned that being known in a small town did not always mean being respected. Sometimes it meant your mistakes were cataloged, whispered about, and passed along like gossip currency. Her mistake had a name, Jason Whitmore. Jason was the golden boy of Willow Creek, son of the richest landowner in 3 counties. Star quarterback back in high school, now co-owner of his father's construction company. He had charm that sparkled like polished silver and a smile that convinced you he meant every word he said. He had also promised Emma forever. For 6 months, he had courted her quietly. Dinners after her shift, long drives through empty country roads, whispered plans about moving to Dallas together. He told her she was different from the girls who chased him. He said he admired her strength. Then she found out she was pregnant. The night she told him, the silver in his smile vanished. "You need to take care of it," he had said flatly, leaning against his truck as if they were discussing the weather. Emma's heart had cracked open. "It's our child." He shook his head. "It's your problem." 2 weeks later, the whispers began. Jason moved quickly. He told people she had tried to trap him. He claimed she had lied about being on birth control. He implied she had been with other men. In a town like Willow Creek, a man with money controlled the narrative. By the time Emma realized what was happening, she had already been painted as reckless, desperate, and manipulative. She lost friends. Customers at the diner stared. Someone spray-painted "homewrecker" on the dumpster behind her apartment. Still, she chose to keep the baby. The night of the fair, she was almost 3 months along. Her stomach barely showed, but in her mind it felt like a glowing secret. A tiny heartbeat that reminded her she was not alone. She had hoped that in the bright lights and music, people might forget. That for one night, she could just be another face in the crowd. Instead, Jason found her. He was standing near the beer tent with a group of friends, laughing too loudly. When his eyes landed on her, the laughter shifted into something sharp. "Well, look who decided to show up," he called out. Heads turned. Emma's body stiffened. She considered walking away, but running would only feed the story. She forced herself to stand still. Jason sauntered toward her, boots crunching against gravel. His friends followed like shadows. "Trying to find another daddy for that kid?" One of them snickered. A few people gasped. Others pretended not to hear. Emma's cheeks burned. "Please, Jason. Not here. Not here," he repeated loudly. "You didn't mind causing drama everywhere else." She felt the crowd tightening around them. The music from the stage seemed to fade. Her throat went dry. "I never lied to you," she said, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry. He laughed, a cold sound. "You expect people to believe that? You think anyone here thinks that baby's mine?" Someone in the back muttered, "Shameful." The words sliced through her. Jason stepped closer. "You should have listened when I told you to fix it." Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach, and that was when someone else stepped forward. He had been standing near the livestock pens, watching the scene unfold with a stillness that did not belong to the chaos. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a weathered hat that cast a shadow over eyes as steady as the horizon. His boots were scuffed from real work, not fashion. His denim shirt was faded at the elbows. His name was Caleb Dawson. Most people in Willow Creek knew of him, but few knew him well. He owned a modest ranch on the outskirts of town. He kept mostly to himself. His father had been a respected cattleman before passing away 5 years earlier. Caleb had inherited not just the ranch, but the quiet strength that came with it. He walked toward them now, unhurried. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was low, but it carried. Jason rolled his eyes. "Stay out of it, cowboy. This doesn't concern you." Caleb looked at Emma first. He saw the tremor in her hands, the sheen in her eyes, the way her shoulders curved inward, as if she were trying to shrink from the world. Then he looked at Jason. "It concerns me," Caleb said calmly, "when a man thinks it's acceptable to humiliate a woman in public." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jason scoffed. "You don't know the story." "I know enough." Emma's heart pounded. She had seen Caleb around town, but had never spoken to him beyond polite nods. Why was he stepping in? Jason's face hardened. "She's trying to pin a kid on me." Caleb's gaze did not waver. "Then that's a matter for adults to handle privately. Not like this." One of Jason's friends laughed. "You planning to play hero?" Caleb took another step forward. The space between him and Emma closed slightly, not possessive, not dramatic, just protective. He turned to her gently. "Miss, are you all right?" The simple question nearly broke her. No one had asked her that in weeks. I'm fine," she whispered, though she clearly wasn't. Jason threw up his hands. "This is ridiculous." Caleb faced him again. "You've said your piece. Now you can walk away." For a second, it looked like Jason might swing at him. Pride and anger flared in his eyes. But Caleb did not flinch. There was something in his posture, unmovable, rooted, that made confrontation feel pointless. The crowd had shifted. People who had been whispering now watched Jason with less certainty. The spectacle was no longer entertaining. It was uncomfortable. Jason glanced around and realized the narrative was slipping. "Whatever," he muttered. "She's not worth it." He turned sharply and pushed through the crowd, his friends trailing behind. The tension dissolved slowly, like smoke thinning in the wind. Caleb looked back at Emma. Up close, she noticed the lines at the corners of his eyes. Not from anger, from years of squinting into sun and weather. There was no pity in his expression, only steady concern. "You don't deserve that," he said quietly. Her voice shook. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." She swallowed. "Why?" He paused, as if choosing words carefully. "Because nobody should stand alone like that." The music from the stage resumed its place in the night. Conversations restarted. The fair moved on, but something had shifted for Emma. She realized her hands were still trembling. Caleb noticed too. "Let me walk you home," he offered. "Just to make sure no one bothers you." She hesitated. Trust had become expensive, but something about him felt different. Solid. "Okay," she said softly. They walked side by side down the dirt road leading away from the fairgrounds. Crickets sang in the tall grass. The moon hung low and full. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, he said, "You don't have to explain anything to me. But if you ever need help, my ranch isn't far." She glanced at him. "People will talk. They already are." A small, unexpected laugh escaped her. He continued, "Let them. I've never been too concerned with gossip." They reached her apartment building, modest and worn. She stopped at the bottom of the steps. "Thank you. For tonight." Caleb met her eyes. "You're safe now," he said. The words wrapped around her like a shield. For the first time since the rumors began, she felt something other than fear and shame. She felt seen. Over the next few days, the story of what happened at the fair spread. But this time, the details were different. People talked about how Jason had gone too far, about how Caleb had stepped in, about how Emma had stood her ground instead of running. The narrative was changing. Caleb began stopping by the diner for coffee in the mornings. He always sat at the counter. He never lingered too long. But he always asked how she was feeling. One afternoon, an older woman approached Emma after witnessing Caleb pay her tab without a word. "He's a good man," the woman whispered. "His father raised him right." Emma found herself looking forward to the sound of the diner door opening. Weeks passed. Her pregnancy became visible. Some stares remained, but fewer carried judgment. More carried curiosity. One evening, as she locked up the diner, Jason appeared again. This time, he was alone. "I didn't expect you to keep it," he said quietly. Emma's heart thudded, but she stood taller. "I told you I would." He looked unsure. Smaller. "My dad's been asking questions," he muttered. "About the fair." Silence stretched between them. "You could still," he began. "No," she cut in firmly. "That's not up for discussion." Before he could respond, another truck pulled into the lot. Caleb stepped out. He didn't rush. He didn't posture. He simply walked over and stood beside her. Jason's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Caleb's presence said enough. After a long moment, Jason turned and left. Emma exhaled. "You don't have to keep rescuing me," she said softly. Caleb shook his head. "I'm not rescuing you. I'm standing with you." Those words mattered more than she could explain. Months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Emma went into labor. The hospital room was small, but filled with light. She had expected to be alone. Instead, Caleb sat in the chair beside her bed, hat resting on his knee. "You don't have to be here," she whispered between contractions. "I know," he replied. When her son was born, tiny and loud and perfect, Emma cried harder than she ever had in her life. Caleb looked at the child with awe. "What will you name him?" he asked. She met his eyes. "Daniel," she said. "It means God is my judge. Not the town. Not gossip." Caleb nodded, emotion thick in his throat. Outside that hospital room, Willow Creek continued its rhythms. But inside, something new had begun. In time, people would learn the truth. A paternity test would confirm what Emma had always known. Jason's father would quietly insist his son take responsibility. Apologies would be attempted. Reputations would shift. But long before justice arrived in paperwork and signatures, something more important had already happened. A woman who had been shamed for all to see had discovered her worth was not decided by a crowd. And a cowboy who could have stayed silent chose instead to speak. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a person can say is not loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is simple. "You're safe now." And sometimes, that is enough.